Today we talk about Magento and 250 million bucks.
This show is for everyone working at the coalface. Digital, business, marketing, social. This is At the Coalface with your host, Jason Greenwood.
Hello everybody, I'm Jason Greenwood. Welcome to episode 50 of At the Coalface. Magical number 50. I'm absolutely pumped to have made it to episode 50. When I started this series off, I didn't know exactly where it would go. I didn't know exactly where I wanted to take it, but I'm learning more every day, getting a bit more of a clearer idea of where I want this to go. Recently made it as a podcast instead of just a video series. And so learning new things all the time, getting better equipment, hopefully getting some great guests on for interviews and lots of other things. So got lots of cool stuff planned for 2017. And really looking forward to meeting more of you at various different events and also catching up with you and connecting with you on social as well. So definitely shoot your questions at me. You can hit me up on Instagram, you can hit me up on Twitter, you can hit me up on Facebook, you can hit me up just about everywhere. So definitely give me a shout. Love to have a conversation with you. Love to give you ideas, bat some things around and see where you guys are sitting when it comes to the world of digital, eComm, anything to do really with that digital space, marketing, social media, etc. So looking forward to catching up with you guys a lot more and engaging with you a lot more in 2017. Now, for exciting episode 50, I want to talk about the recent announcement by Magento that they've received $250 million in funding by a Chinese venture capital firm. Now, the reason why I want to talk about this is because I've worked with Magento for a very long time as a platform, both agency side as well as merchant side. So I've got a lot of background with the Magento platform. I know a lot of the key players. I know Mark Lavelle, and I know a lot of the key players over on the vendor side of Magento, and a lot of the, us used to know Roy when he was still with Magento, and even though he's back on their board, and know Jari Carter, and so some of the founders of Magento as well, know them really well. And so I guess I have a bit of a history with Magento. It's a bit of a checkered history in a sense, because I definitely haven't, I guess, drunk the Magento Kool-Aid enough to the point where I don't see the warts of the platform. Every platform has its challenges. Every platform has its warts. And so I definitely see the pros and the cons of the Magento platform. But specifically as it relates to this investment, I wanted to give my thoughts on kind of what I believe Magento is likely to do with this investment and why they've made this play now. When they've previously been owned by eBay, and they've gone through a really bit of quite a few changes in their past. They in 2016 they launched Magento 2, and they've had a lot of teething issues with that product, but they're finally starting to get some headway there. They've got some really good penetration in the Western marketplace, and so really they don't have a great presence in Asia. They don't have huge market share in Asia, and I think there's a number of reasons for that. And I want to talk about those briefly today. But more importantly, I want to sort of set the stage for why I wanted to talk about this particular subject, because I think it brings up a wider discussion around e-commerce platforms, how they fit into the digital and e-commerce ecosystem, but also more importantly how Magento and their moves affects or potentially could affect other platforms downstream, as well as how it's going to affect you specifically if you use Magento or if you're potentially looking to use Magento, and why they've made these moves. So let's get stuck straight into it. So I believe that one of the reasons why they've taken on this investment now, if you believe their press release, it's really to take on sales and marketing people, a bit more product development, and a few other things, but really their focus clearly has been sales and marketing, and they haven't really even mentioned much about taking that investment and localizing it for regional markets. Now, I think the biggest telltale sign of what they're going to do with this money is where the money originated from. It originated from China, a Chinese venture capital investment firm. I think that's a big tell. I think when you think about where this money has come from, clearly they're going to be targeting the Chinese market specifically, and probably the broader Asian market more broadly. Now, why would they be targeting the Chinese market? If we think about this logically and we think about it strategically, it probably makes a whole lot of sense. with the ICP rules, so the Internet Content Provider rules in China, and a whole lot of the other regulations around registration of domain name, the hosting of the domain name, if it's Chinese domain name, has to be hosted in China. The hosting for that website has to be hosted within China, inside the Great Firewall of China. And so unless you want to do cross-border trade into China, if you want to do domestic e-commerce, you have to have your site hosted in China. Now, that pretty much precludes or locks out every single major SaaS e-commerce platform in the marketplace, the global SaaS e-commerce platforms. And the reason for that is, if you look at BigCommerce, if you look at Shopify, if you look at Demandware, you look at any of these products, none of them have data centers inside China, inside the Great Firewall of China. And so therefore, they're never going to get any traction there unless they do that. And there's a whole lot of hurdles to go through legislatively for them to do that. So I don't see them doing that anytime soon. So, when you've reached saturation in the Western market, like Magento has in many markets, they've reached saturation. They're over 40% in Australia. They're around that 30% mark roughly in North America, and so they've lost a lot of traction. And so, apart from upgrading existing customers from Magento 1x to 2x, where's their growth going to come from? It's going to come from Asia. And why is it going to come from Asia? It's going to come from Asia because the vast majority of e-commerce sites in Asia are self-hosted products. What is Magento? It's a self-hosted product. Don't kid yourself, even though they have a so-called cloud product, it's not a cloud product, it's not a SaaS product. They tried that with Magento Go, it failed miserably. It's absolutely a self-hosted product. Regardless of whether you put it on AWS infrastructure or somebody else's infrastructure, it's still a self-hosted product. So, where's their growth going to come from? It's going to come from markets that have a large proliferation or a large strength of self-hosted products. That's China. So what are they going to do with this money? I believe they're going to do a lot of localization. They're going to start localizing their product for the Asian markets, which means they're going to need to localize for Mandarin, and they're going to need to localize potentially for Japanese and Korean as well if they want to penetrate the wider Asian markets. And so what's going to happen is you're going to get a real focus from Magento. I think over the next 12 to 24 months, they're going to hit the ground running really, really hard from a sales and marketing perspective in those markets. They're going to, on the product side, they're going to have to localize it, especially for Magento 2. It's easier for them to localize Magento 2 because it's got a better localization, a modular localization architecture. And as a result of that, I think that's where they're going to pour a lot of that money. So I think you're going to see some big growth for Magento in those less mature e-commerce markets, where when you look at China, one of the more mature e-commerce markets, if you think of it that way, is their marketplace space. So when you look at Tmall, when you look at JD, when you look at AliExpress, when you look at the other marketplaces that are operating in China, that's where the vast majority of e-commerce is currently done. It's not on own brand e-commerce sites. And so I think Magento's got a big opportunity there. If they can get some good traction in that market, they're going to do very, very well. So that's my take on where I think they're going to go, both with the money and the investment, but also strategically. Why are they targeting the Asian markets, in particular China? Why have they taken this investment from the Chinese market? This investment coming from the Chinese investors, those Chinese investors will have good connections in China. It's going to bode well for them to be able to have people that can give them some real commercial guidance in that market. So I believe that's what's going to happen. Now, what does that do to you? If you run Magento, you're thinking about running Magento, and you're in a Western market or a non-Asian market, European, whatever, what does that do for you? Well, I think it doesn't necessarily directly benefit you in terms of the localization, but where it may benefit you is with the growth in features and functionality that will grow across the entire platform, not just for the localized market of China. So I think that's where it's going to benefit you. So ultimately, I think it will potentially have some upside in it for everybody who runs the Magento platform anyway, but I think it will particularly benefit those in the Asian markets. So that's my take. Love to hear your take. Love to hear your thoughts. Going to be really, really interesting to see how this plays out. Considering that SaaS products, web-based products, are really, really starting to take over the rest of the market, particularly in the West, because the legislative control and the legislative rules around that are much more open and much more free. So it'll be really interesting to see how this plays out. Look forward to hearing your thoughts. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.